water, etc. Even today, we see signs that use the kappa to mark danger. Actually, the top left corner has a warning sign like danger. You could drown, slip, fall, or get nabbed by a kappa if you play around this river.
Another thing that I don't remember exactly which source this is, but it also was believed that the origin of the stories about kappa possibly could have been parents telling their children about these demons in order to keep their children from playing too close to the river, because it was believed that they sort of threw stillborn children into the water.
Aborted fetuses were also thrown into the river. They weren't buried or cremated. Also, deformed babies were killed and thrown into the river. So it's possibly
important to keep children away from that.
There's also another origin story that say that actually those thrown away babies are revived and come back as kappa, which is one of the reasons why it's called a river child, or translates to a river child anyway. Alright, so now we're going to move on to yurei, or ghosts. How does one become a yurei in Japanese folklore?
So in traditional Japanese beliefs, it's believed that after a person passes on, their spirit becomes a vehicle and enters sort of a middle ground between the living world and the world of the dead, and then it's up to the family members and just people taking care of the body to perform the proper ceremonies and rites to send the vehicle on and not get trapped there. And if this is successful, then the spirit becomes a guardian spirit and can protect the family and bring good fortune. And for the Obon festival, this is when they sort of come back to mingle amongst the living and sort of receive thanks for all of the hard work that they're doing.
It's very similar to the Day of the Dead tradition in Latin culture. However,
when there is a sudden, unexpected, and violent death, or if proper rites aren't performed, like if the body hasn't been found, that's when sort of things go wrong and the spirit can't pass on or settle and becomes very, very angry and starts to hold grudges. And this is when they become trapped in a particular area or just become incredibly fixated on something, and that's when you have all of the stories about yurei.
We also want to clarify that yurei are the only kinds of spirits that can bridge the gap between the physical world and this sort of spiritual underworld to a certain extent. Whereas the vehicle that we talked about can only come during the Obon festival, because that's the only way the passage is made for them. But yurei can technically come at any time. Now, how do you know if this person that you see on the road alone at night is a yurei, or
you didn't learn the first time?
Yes, you didn't learn the first time with the kuchisake onna or the yuki onna, and you keep going at it.
One of the first things would be the white clothes, because when this association comes from the fact that when you bury a body, the person's always wearing a white kimono. Aside from that, the hair is when you bury a body, you don't do the hair up at all, obviously, so it's hanging free and looks a bit disheveled, might be in the face, which is probably very familiar to people who watch horror movies. I think that's sort of a necessity for female Japanese ghosts. Also, it won't have any hands, or it won't have any feet, and the hands will probably be dangling in front.
Because somehow a spirit has difficulty manipulating this part of their body, so they just also, the other thing we want to mention is the white kimono or white clothing. If it's a kimono especially, it will be right over left, the folds of it, as opposed to left over right, because that's how Japanese dress the dead. So that's a distinct feature if you're close enough to look at that kind of thing.
So if you have a wardrobe malfunction and you do it wrong, then
assuming you're not dyslexic and can't figure out left and right.
Another aspect of the yurei is that these hitodama, or human soul, will probably be trailing around. These aren't actually, in spite of the name, they aren't actually human souls. It's more of an extension of a spirit. So if the spirit's actually really, really powerful, then there might be countless number of these. So,
okay. Now, where might you typically find a yurei? So, like we said before, they generally stay near a specific location, and it can be the site of their death, or it can be where they were murdered is the same thing as death. Sorry. An example of a very popular place you can find yurei is Aokigahara, which is the forest at the foot of Mount Fuji. It's sometimes called the Forest of Death by the locals. And it's popular because lots of young people go there to commit suicide there. And it's said that, you know, compasses don't point north in that area, and all this wacky stuff happens.
you're not allowed to go there anymore.
Well, you are, but there's always these signs that, like, say, if you're thinking about suicide, please reconsider and go back and seek a counselor. And they have phone numbers of all these counselors listed on the side of the road. I am not kidding. They're all over the different routes.
They did one on destination here. They went to the forest and investigated. There were 7 signs.
Destination. Oh.
Now,
the other times that you can find yurei, or the other place a yurei might haunt, is the location of its corpse. Say it was killed somewhere, or it died somewhere, but the corpse was transported somewhere else, and that's one of the reasons why it can't pass on, because no one can find the body, then it will typically haunt that area.
Or if you follow a specific person that has either problem with or a very strong emotional attachment to,
Right, someone that they regretted leaving behind. They usually appear between 2 and 3 a.m. That's essentially the witching hour in Japan. It doesn't necessarily mean that no yurei will ever show up before 2. You know, some are early risers and some are but the reason being that it's believed this time period is where the veils between the dead world, the world of the dead and the world of the living is thinnest and easiest to cross over. So 2 really famous yurei that come up again and again in popular culture is the Lady Rokujo from the classical novel Tale of Genji.
And she's an example of a person who is still alive, having it's sort of like astral projection, and it's called a living ghost. So in other words, her resentment was so strong that she turned her soul into a ghost to go off and attack people because her man was having fun times with other women. Women are evil. Another example is actually the story of Oiwa, and that's a very popular story that's been turned into kabuki. It's gone beyond just oral storytelling. Oiwa herself was an average-looking woman who was married to a man who was very discontent with his position in life. And he meets this other woman who's really pretty, and her father is really wealthy. So he conspires to kill Oiwa by poisoning her. But she actually survives and becomes deformed from the poison. And of course, then she kills herself or dies of grief. The story is very afterwards, realizing what her husband tried to do to her. After she dies, the husband marries the woman he intended. But on their wedding night, when he goes to spend their honeymoon together, he lifts her veil and he sees Oiwa's deformed face. So he freaks out and he kills her. Then when he comes to, he realizes he's killed his new wife. So he freaks out, especially because he was very paranoid, because right before that happened, actually, Oiwa's servant was suspicious about it, knew what happened, and he tried to divulge that secret. And so the husband killed him and nailed him to a door and threw him in the river. How that hide the body, I do not know. But when he goes to the father after he's killed his new wife, his new father-in-law that is, and he tries to explain what happened, instead of seeing his father-in-law, he sees that servant, and so he freaks out and he kills him too. Now he's wanted for 2 murders, and
people are a little suspicious about his first wife. So he's on the run, and he's constantly being chased by Oiwa's deformed, disfigured face. And eventually, he is starving, and so he tries to go fishing, and he pulls up the door with the body on it. And after that, Oiwa's brother finally catches up with him and kills him. So that's the story that is reused in kabuki theater and even in a lot of movies, actually. But one of the things that's interesting, especially about the theater, is that there's this superstition that whenever someone performs the Oiwa play, the Oiwa spirit will actually come back. And troops have actually sworn that they've gone out after performing it, and they order a meal, and the guy's like, yes, okay, I got your order. And what about the woman over there? And they're like, what woman? It's like, the woman right behind you. And apparently, she haunts the person who plays her role, etc. So sometimes they try to make a space for her in their bowing so that she doesn't get offended, that they're using her as source material. This is a photo example of the makeup job that is done to the actress who plays the role of Oiwa.
Obviously, the important bit is getting rid of